The lights at Zion Chaudhry's rooftop party were the kind designed to make beautiful people look more beautiful. Golden, warm, tilted just right. Era Malik had never belonged in those lights, and she had always known it, but she came anyway, the way people come to places that hurt them, hoping this time might be different. She wore a deep blue kurta she had ironed 3 times. Her hair was pulled back neatly. She wasn't wearing much makeup, she never did, and her shoes were the same block heels she had owned for 2 years. She looked clean, careful, and completely out of place among the women who floated through that rooftop in designer silhouettes and effortless confidence. But Era wasn't there for the party. She was there because Zion had asked her to come. Just as a friend, he had said on the phone, casual as ever. And Era, who had quietly loved Zion Chaudhry for almost 3 years, had told herself that was enough. She found him near the bar, laughing with a circle of people who all looked like they had been assembled from a magazine. He saw her and gave a small wave, friendly, distant, the kind of wave you give someone who exists at the edges of your life. She smiled and moved toward the edge of the rooftop, looking out at the city. Nadia had warned her not to come. He doesn't see you, Era, Nadia had said, sitting cross-legged on Era's bed that afternoon. And one day you're going to realize the problem was never your face. Era had laughed it off. Now, standing alone with a glass of juice she wasn't drinking, she wished she had listened. It was Omar who first heard it. Omar Farhan, Zion's advisor, was standing just behind the group when one of the women, tall, decorated, clearly interested in Zion, asked him, nodding in Era's direction, "Who's she?" "She looks a little plain for your crowd." Zion glanced over. And then he laughed, not cruelly, but casually, which was almost worse. "She's a colleague," he said. "Sweet girl. Just not really the kind of woman you picture beside someone building an empire, you know? There's a type for this world, and," he shrugged, smiling, "she's just not it." The group moved on. The conversation moved on. But Omar stood very still, and across the rooftop, Era, who had not heard the words but had seen the glance, the laugh, the shrug, felt something inside her go very quiet. She set her glass down on the ledge. She picked up her bag. She did not cry. She did not confront him. She simply walked to the elevator, pressed the button, and when the doors closed, she looked at her own reflection in the polished metal and made herself a single, silent promise. "You are not forgettable. Prove it." The rented room was 12 feet by 10. Era knew because she had measured it herself, standing in the center with a measuring tape she had borrowed from her landlady, Mrs. Irani, a retired schoolteacher who charged fair rent and asked no questions. The room had one window that faced a narrow alley, a ceiling fan that wobbled slightly on the left side, and a small desk where Era placed her laptop, a notepad, and a single photograph of her mother. That was all she needed. That was all she took from her old life when she left the city and started over in a quieter one. Nadia had driven her there. She had carried one of the boxes without being asked, set it down, looked around the small room, and said, "Perfect. Small enough that there's nowhere to hide from your own potential." Era had laughed, the first real laugh in weeks. Those first months were not glamorous. Era worked 3 freelance contracts at once, writing market analysis reports for firms that never learned her name. She slept 6 hours, sometimes 5. She made spreadsheets at midnight and read case studies at dawn. She had always been the quiet one in the room, the one people looked past, but she had also always been the one who understood things deeply, who saw patterns others missed, who asked the question that changed the direction of a meeting. She had been wasting that. She saw it clearly now. It was MS Chen who changed everything, though their meeting looked, at the time, like nothing more than a delayed flight. Era was at the airport, returning from a client meeting, sitting in a corner chair with her laptop open, when an older woman sat beside her and peered, unapologetically, at her screen. "That's a strong analysis," the woman said. "Your margin projection for the second quarter is wrong, though. You've underweighted the supply chain variable." Era looked up. The woman was perhaps 60, dressed simply, with sharp eyes and the calm of someone who had nothing left to prove. "I know," Era said. "I flagged it in the footnote. The client doesn't read footnotes." MS Chen had smiled at that. "I read footnotes," she said, and extended her hand. They talked for 2 hours. Ms. Chen was a venture capitalist who had backed 11 companies, 4 of which had become industry leaders. She did not hand out her time easily. But something about Era, her precision, her honesty, the way she argued her own point without apology, made her stay. "What do you actually want to build?" Ms. Chen asked before they boarded. Era didn't hesitate. "A firm that finds overlooked markets and turns them into ecosystems. I've been overlooked my whole life. I know exactly where the value hides." Ms. Chen looked at her for a long moment. "Send me your full analysis by Friday." Era sent it Thursday night. Within 6 months, Ms. Chen had introduced her to 2 co-investors, connected her with a network of mentors, and helped her register her holding company, Aerial Ventures. The name was Nadia's idea, because you built your world under the surface, and now you're coming up. The work was relentless, but Era discovered something important inside it. Discipline is not punishment. She had always thought hard work was what you did when you lacked talent, when you had to compensate for some missing quality. She understood now that discipline was its own form of intelligence, the intelligence of showing up, of choosing the long view, of trusting that the compound interest of daily effort eventually becomes an empire. She also learned to receive mentorship without pride. Ms. Chen was direct and occasionally blunt. She told Era once, plainly, "You explain too much. People who are confident in their ideas state them and stop talking." Era wrote it down. She practiced it. She changed. Nadia joined her at the 8-month mark, leaving a stable job to become Era's operations head. "I didn't leave stability," Nadia told her on her first day. "I came toward something better." By the end of the year, Aerial Ventures had made 3 strategic acquisitions, all in undervalued tech infrastructure sectors. Quietly, carefully, deliberately, the way Era had always done everything. No press. No announcements. Just work. And then Omar Farhan sent her a message. It was brief. "You should know that Zion's company is in trouble. I thought you deserved to know." Era read it once. Then she opened her laptop and began reading Zion Chaudhry's company financials, not out of bitterness, but with the eyes of an investor who recognized a collapsing structure that still had good bones. She called Ms. Chen. "I found our next acquisition," she said. Zion Chaudhry had always believed that confidence was the same thing as competence. For a long time, the world had not corrected him. He had launched ZC Tech 3 years ago on a bold idea, an RA-driven logistics platform, and the early numbers had been extraordinary. Press loved him. Investors crowded around him. He gave interviews where he spoke about vision and disruption with the ease of someone reading from a script he had written for himself. He was photographed at the right events. He said the right things. But the product had developed cracks that Zion kept painting over. The logistics algorithm had a latency problem that his engineering team had flagged 14 months ago. Zion had told them to manage the optics while he focused on fundraising. The team had tried. Then 3 of the best engineers left, quietly, professionally, without drama. Zion had replaced them quickly and told himself talent was interchangeable. It wasn't. By the time the third quarter reports came in, 2 major investors had already scheduled exit conversations. Zion sat in his glass-walled office and read the numbers with the particular stillness of someone who cannot yet admit what they are seeing. Omar placed a printed report on his desk one morning without saying anything. Zion read the headline summary, closed the folder, and said, "We need better PR." Omar sat down across from him. "We need a better product, Zion." The silence between them was a new kind of silence, one that had not existed between them before. Omar had been with Zion from the beginning, had believed in him, had smoothed over more rough edges than Zion knew. But something in Omar had shifted in the past year. He had watched someone else build something real, quietly, from nothing, and it had recalibrated his understanding of what leadership actually looked like. "There's something else," Omar said carefully. "Someone has been buying shares in ZC Tech. Small purchases, spread across 6 months. Clean, quiet, strategic, legal, completely, but deliberate." Zion frowned. "Who?" "A holding company called Aerial Ventures. I've been trying to trace the principal investor." Omar paused. "I think you should look into it before the board meeting next week." Zion waved his hand. Holding companies buy distressed shares all the time. It's probably a hedge play. Zion. Omar, I have 3 investor calls today and a product demo tomorrow that isn't ready. The holding company can wait. Omar nodded slowly and left the office. He did not tell Zion what he already suspected, that he had seen the Aerial Ventures filings, had recognized a certain precision in the acquisition strategy, had searched the company registration and found a name that made something cold move through him. Because Omar had been standing on that rooftop the night Zion had laughed and said she's just not it. And now Omar was fairly certain that she had bought 51% of Zion's company before Zion even knew her name had changed. The board meeting came on a Tuesday. The agenda had 3 points, but the room already felt different. Quieter, arranged differently, 2 new faces sitting at the far end of the long table that Zion did not recognize. The chairperson cleared her throat and said, steadily, that ZC Tech had undergone a majority acquisition. That the new controlling stakeholder had invoked their right to board representation. That a meeting with the principal investor had been scheduled for Thursday at 9 a.m. Who is the investor? Zion asked, his voice measured. The chairperson glanced at her papers. The principal of Aerial Ventures. MS Era Malik. The room continued its agenda. Papers shuffled. Someone poured water. Zion did not move. He sat with that name expanding in his chest like something that had waited patiently a very long time to be felt. Omar, seated 2 chairs away, looked at the table. And somewhere across the city, in an office with wide windows and quiet lighting, Era was reviewing Thursday's agenda with Nadia, who was highlighting sections of the financial brief with a yellow marker and occasionally, between items, smiling to herself. Nervous? Nadia asked without looking up. No, Era said. And she meant it completely. Thursday arrived the way important days always do, ordinary on the outside, extraordinary underneath. Era was at her office by 7:30. She wore a charcoal grey suit she had bought 6 months ago for a meeting she had known, even then, would eventually come. Her hair was down, something she rarely did in professional settings, and her only jewelry was a thin gold bracelet her mother had given her the day she had called home to say the company was profitable. Nadia had handed her a coffee at the door and said, "Remember, you don't owe him a single dramatic line. Your presence is the drama." Era had taken the coffee, nodded once, and said nothing. The ZC Tech boardroom was on the 14th floor of a building that Zion had chosen specifically because it had floor-to-ceiling windows and a view of the city's financial district. He had wanted people to walk in and feel the weight of what he was building. Today, that same view worked quietly against him. Zion arrived at 8:55. He had not slept well. He had spent 2 days telling himself this was a routine acquisition matter, a negotiation, a business conversation. He had worn his best suit. He had rehearsed composure. Omar was already seated. The 2 Aerial Ventures representatives Era had sent ahead were reviewing documents at the far end. A woman Zion didn't recognize was writing something in a leather notebook near the window. At exactly 9 o'clock, the door opened. Era walked in the way people walk when they have stopped performing and started simply being. There was no theatrical pause, no sweeping entrance. She moved directly to the head of the table, Zion's usual seat, which she now occupied by right, set down a slim folder, looked at the room, and said, "Good morning. Let's begin." It took Zion 4 full seconds to process what he was seeing. She looked the same face, the same eyes, but everything else had changed in a way he could not immediately name. It wasn't the suit or the posture. It was something interior, something that had solidified. She looked like someone who had found the correct version of herself and settled into it completely. She didn't look at him with triumph. She didn't look at him with coldness. She looked at him the way a senior professional looks at a junior one, with a kind of patient, courteous neutrality that was somehow more devastating than anger. "Mr. Chaudhry," she said, glancing at him briefly. "Thank you for being here." The meeting ran for 90 minutes. Era led it without notes, citing figures from memory, asking precise questions, redirecting tangents with a single polite sentence. She presented Aerial Ventures' restructuring plan for ZC Tech, not a dismantling, but a rebuilding. She had identified the latency problem in the algorithm, had already spoken with 2 engineers who were willing to return if leadership structure changed, and had outlined an 18-month recovery roadmap that was, by any honest measure, exactly what the company needed. Zion spoke when spoken to. He answered questions. He made 2 points that were actually good, and Era acknowledged them directly. That's a strong observation, thank you, without softening them or inflating them, just receiving them as they were. That honesty undid him more than dismissal would have. Omar watched Zion's face throughout the meeting. He saw the exact moment it shifted, not into embarrassment, though that was there too, but into something more complicated. Recognition. The particular ache of seeing someone's value only after you no longer have the right to claim it. After the formal meeting ended and the others filtered out, Zion remained seated. Era was gathering her folder. Nadia, who had sat along the side wall, caught Era's eye and gave the smallest nod before slipping out and closing the door behind her. Zion said, quietly, "Era." She looked up. Not startled. She had known he would try. "You look well," he said, because he could not find the right sentence, and that one at least was true. "I am well," she said simply. He searched for words. "What you've built, what you've done in a year, it's extraordinary. I mean that." "I know you mean it," she said. And there was no bitterness in it. Just clarity. She picked up her folder. "The restructuring team will be in touch by Monday. Omar has the contact list." She paused at the door, then turned back, not dramatically, just practically, as though she had remembered one final agenda item. "You had good instincts, Zion. You still do. You just spent too long using them to manage appearances instead of building something real. I hope that changes." And then she left. Zion sat alone in his own boardroom for a long time after that, looking at the city through the floor-to-ceiling windows he had chosen so carefully, and felt for the first time what it was like to be on the other side of a room where someone else was the most powerful presence. 2 weeks after the board meeting, Zion Chaudhry requested a private meeting with Era. Not through the restructuring team, not through Omar. He sent a message directly, 3 sentences, carefully worded, asking if she would give him 20 minutes of her time outside of a professional setting. Era read it twice. Then she forwarded it to Nadia. Nadia replied with a single line, "Your call. You already won. This part is just for you." Era thought about it for a day. She went on her evening walk, something she had started during the first hard months, a habit that had become the place where she made her clearest decisions. She walked along the river path she had claimed as her own, past the old bookstall and the tea cart and the bench where she sometimes sat and read, and she asked herself what she actually wanted. Not what she deserved. Not what would make the best ending to a story someone else might tell. What she, Era Malik, actually wanted. The answer was simpler than she expected. She wanted to close this chapter cleanly. Not with silence, not with a door slammed shut, but with the kind of honest conversation that lets a person move forward without carrying old weight. She had forgiven Zion many months ago, not as a gift to him, but as a gift to herself, because she had learned that unforgiveness is just a way of staying in a room you've already left. She agreed to meet him. They met at a small cafe that Era chose, not the kind of place Zion usually frequented. No golden lighting, no designed ambience, just clean tables and good tea and a window that looked out onto an ordinary street. She was already seated when he arrived. She had ordered for herself. She did not stand when he came in. Zion sat across from her and for a moment said nothing. He looked tired in the way people look when they have been honest with themselves for the first time in a long while. "I don't have a speech prepared," he said finally. "I know," she said. "That's why I came." He looked at her. "I didn't see you. Not because you were invisible. You were never invisible. I just wasn't looking for anything real." He paused. "And I said something that night. I know you didn't hear it directly, but I think somehow you felt it, and I need to say that it was wrong. Not wrong the way people say things are wrong when they mean inconvenient or poorly timed. Genuinely wrong. Cruel, even. And you didn't deserve it." Era was quiet for a moment. The street outside carried its ordinary sounds, a motorcycle, someone laughing, a vendor calling out. "I know I didn't," she said gently. "I knew it that night too, actually. I just didn't have the evidence yet." A small, unhurried smile. "I've spent a lot of time not letting what you said define me. I'm not going to let this conversation define me either. That's not, he started, then stopped. I'm not trying to come back into your life. I know that too, she said. I just needed to say it. And now you have. They drank their tea. They talked for almost an hour, not about the company, not about the acquisition, but about other things. She told him about Ms. Chen, about the rented room, about the ceiling fan that wobbled. He told her, honestly, about the moment he realized the engineers leaving was his fault, not theirs. They talked like two people who had known each other once and were now meeting as different versions of themselves, which was, precisely, what they were. When they left the cafe, Zion said, I hope you know you deserved better than the version of me that was in your life before. Era put on her sunglasses and looked at the street. I do know that, she said. And so did the version of me that was in it. She just took a little while to agree. She walked left. He walked right. The city continued around them, indifferent and full and alive. Nadia was waiting for her back at the office, pretending to review a report. How was it? She asked without looking up. Clean, Era said, hanging up her jacket. Let's look at the Jakarta market data. I think there's something there. Nadia closed her folder and reached for her laptop. I've been waiting for you to say that for a week. And they worked, the way they always worked, with focus and quiet pleasure and the deep satisfaction of people who have chosen their own lives deliberately and are living them fully.